Hey guys, today we're going to look at what is commonly referred to as the Tristan chord, which comes from an opera, music written by Richard Wagner in the mid 19th century, around 1857 to 59. He wrote this music, and the opera, which he would have called a music drama, premiered in 1865. So the Tristan chord itself occurs in the second full measure, the very, very beginning of the prelude. But we're going to play the first 11 bars or so to give some context. Of course, this is a piano reduction. This would have started with the cellos, and then the woodwinds coming in. Break, and then we continue. And then an extension of this. And then it keeps going. But the chord that we're in question here is the second measure. When everybody finally comes in, this chord, F, B, D sharp, and G sharp. This is called the Tristan chord. And I'm going to explain it, but before I do, I'd like for you to pause the video and take a look at it and see if you can analyze it within its context. This is tonal music. So there are chords here, and there is a tonality here, although it's disguised. So take a look at it, and then when you're ready, come back and we'll talk about it together. Okay, so let's take a look at this Tristan chord and see if we can make sense of it functionally within a tonal context. The chord itself is here with this F, B, D sharp, and G sharp. So as we do anytime we analyze music, we try to stack these notes into thirds and see what kind of chord we can come up with. And at first glance, it seems that we have a very promising solution, because if we just stack the letters in thirds, we have a G, B, D, and an F. So let's take a look at that construction on a different piece of paper. First of all, let's write down the notes that we have in the order that they appear from the root or from the bass up. We have F, B, D sharp, and G sharp. So if we take G sharp as the root, then we would spell this chord G sharp, B, D sharp, and F. So as we look at this construction, we see that we have a minor third, and then essentially a whole step. We have a diminished third, which is essentially a whole step in sound. So this really doesn't work. We don't really have any tertian harmony chords that have a whole step at the top. So that while this looks promising, this doesn't work with that note being the root. So we have to consider that maybe one of the other notes is the root. So why don't we try the B? So we'd have B, if we unraveled these into thirds, B, D sharp, F, G sharp. Taking a look at that, we have the same problem we had before. In the middle of our chord, we have a whole step, which doesn't really make any sense with this G sharp on top. So this doesn't really work as a solution. So what if we try D sharp as our chordal root? Then we'd have D sharp, F, G sharp, and B. And here again we have the same issue at the base of our chord. We have essentially a whole step in sound. So that really doesn't work as a functional tertian harmony chord. And so that leaves the F as our only other possible root. So if we unraveled it in thirds, starting on F, we'd have F, G sharp, B, and D sharp. It looks here like we have a whole step with F to G, but if we think in harmonically, we actually can see this as a minor third. So what we can think now is this note could be A flat, this note can be C flat, and this note can be E flat, and harmonically, then we've got something here. So now we've got minor third and major third, which is an F half diminished chord. Okay, so in the context that we're dealing with tonal harmony, when would we ever find a half diminished chord? Well, there's two common places in our tonal system where we find half diminished chords, and they are the 2 chord in minor and the 7 chord in major. So if F diminished, half diminished, was the 2 chord in a minor key, the key would be E flat minor. If F half diminished was the 7 chord in a major key, it would be G flat major. And these 2 chords really don't have anything to do with this harmony. E flat minor and G flat major really don't work here because we're about to head to this E, G sharp, B, D chord, which is an E7. So preceding it with F half diminished doesn't really work tonally. We do have one other option for half diminished, and that is the lesser used sharp 6 in minor keys, which comes from the melodic minor mode, where we have the sharp 6 scale degree producing a half diminished chord, and in this case that would be A flat minor would have the F half diminished as the 6th chord half diminished, and that really doesn't work here either because this has nothing to do with E flat minor, G flat major, or A flat minor. So because of this, we have to consider maybe this G sharp is not a chord tone, since we do have another option in this bar before the next chord occurs. What if we consider the A to be the chord tone instead of the G sharp? And that gives us other choices. And so what's happening here, if we consider the A to be the chord tone, that we would have F, A, if we unravel this in thirds, F, A, B, D sharp. Now this is a more familiar chord to us because this is the French augmented 6th chord in A minor. And you remember how this works. This would be lay going down to so, or flat 6 going to 5 if you consider do to be scale degree 1. So flat 6 going to 5 usually would do this in the bass, and this would typically do that, so that they go in opposite directions to outline the 5 of the key, and then it would go home to A minor next. And then the inner notes would fill out the chord, E sharp, or E, G sharp, B. In this case, what's happening is this, but it's a 7th chord, and remember when these augmented 6th chords resolve to 7th chords, this upper note typically goes down, so it will go to the 7th instead of going contrary motion with the augmented 6th interval. typically they go contrary motion, but when you are trying to produce a seventh chord, then this E7 requires this note to go down instead of up. And that's what Wagner does, but he also disguises this chord further by putting an A sharp in front of the B. So if we take all that into consideration, this would be not an F half diminished chord, but it would be a French augmented sixth chord in A minor, moving to the 5/7, and this note would be a non-chord tone, passing tone, and this note would be a non-chord tone, the G sharp, so that the A and the B, which are delayed, are the actual chord tones, and these notes are the non-chord tones. And this makes sense in the tonal context. Now remember that every French augmented sixth chord is invertible at the tritone, so this could also be a French augmented sixth chord with B as the root, but it wouldn't make any sense in this key, so I rejected that notion. So this makes complete sense with this French augmented sixth going to 5/7. And if you did consider this to be a B chord, it could be a B7 flat 5, which is a secondary dominant, perhaps, but I think French augmented sixth makes the most sense here, and it does make sense that this is in A minor. We don't have a key signature, so that would be the A minor key signature. We have A moving to F, which is the characteristic flat 6 in minor, moving to the perfect fifth, re-emphasizing the key of A minor in the opening. So we have the actual Tristan chord is F, B, D sharp, G sharp, which is a non-chord tone mixed in, but this is the Tristan chord. But this is how it works functionally within the context. And as it goes on, it will sequence itself and so on. So this is the Tristan chord, and this is how it functions in the context of the prelude.